one of the things, and I suspect that when you got that call for this role, that brain kicked in, right? And you did not want to go do this. And so, and I'm sure a lot of people who get asked to do this job are in that same mindset. So what have you learned that might help others who are going to be stepping into that first CDO role, or even another CDO role that's bigger than the last one they had? What have you learned that might help them as they're thinking about this?
You know, the first thing I know is that you can't do this without top leadership. And I don't just mean some of the top leadership. I mean with the leader of the company. You need commitment from the CEO in order to actually be successful in the work. You need resources. You know, it's interesting. Like I said, I've talked to a lot of people since George Floyd's murder who've been asked to take this role on, and it's just them. And you know, you got a 20, 30, 40, 100,000 person organization, and they've asked you to take this role, and there's no resources. So I'm like, look, anything a company is serious about, they will invest dollars and resources in it. And so so that's the other thing I would say. You got to ask for resources. If I was starting out, I'd create at least 3 functions as a new CDO that's starting from scratch. You need access to data. You need access to the HR data so that you can get representation data on people of color and gender in a way that you can begin to examine your organization and begin to ask yourself, does our representation look like we want it to look? And if it doesn't, what are the practices, policies, and behaviors we need to begin to put in place to actually begin to get the representation that we want? But representation is not enough. You also got to focus on how do we create a culture that if we did get the representation we want, that they'll actually stay because the culture is inclusive and respects them for who they are. So you got to be able to get at data. You got to have someone who does strategy. And I'll tell you, I took my old tech strategy guy and I said, hey, come do strategy for me. He's like, what do I know about D&I strategy? I'm like, what do I know about D&I? But you know strategy. So help me develop a strategic approach to do this work. And then the last thing I'll tell you is you need to actually focus on communication and branding, right? How do you communicate and brand what it is your aspiration is, both internal and external, so that you can actually begin to tell a story about the work you're doing, to begin to get people to believe that the story you're telling is something that the company is actually trying to accomplish. So those would be kind of the 3 functional things. But the most important thing is getting leaderships to stand up and say, this is something that's important. I remember one of my early conversations with Doug, he asked me, he said, how can I help? And again, I wish I was smart enough to have thought this all out, but you know, sometimes, you know, we end up being blessed with insight that comes from we don't know where. What I said to him was, I said, Doug, when you talk about the business, when you talk about the integration of our digital business with our physical business in a way that we can serve customers when they want, where they want, anytime they want, how they want, making it seamless to the customer, taking the friction out of our ability to serve customers. I said, if you close with, and we want this to be an inclusive place for everyone, for customers and for our associates. I said, that's all I need you to say right now. And he goes, what? That's it? And I said, that's it. And he said, should I say anything more? I said, Doug, you will figure out on your own what to say more. But when you start talking about inclusion, and that was one of the big changes we made when I took this job. We spent more time talking about inclusion, including everyone. I'm going to say this again, including white males. Yeah. And I got a lot of emails from white males who said, Ben, this is the first time I felt like I could participate in the work. I've been afraid to say anything. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. But we actually need them at the table helping, because 9 times out of 10, they're in the jobs that can really make a difference. And as Doug began to talk about inclusion, people begin to make the connection because the diversity office was talking about inclusion. And so he's the biggest advocate for the work now. And it makes it a lot easier for us to get the work done because it's actually part of the business strategy now. Our inclusive approach supports the diversity that we have in the organization.